Welcome to New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio, fostering the growth of collaboration through shared resources while empowering families to divorce with dignity. This is New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio is brought to you by the Collaborative Divorce Professionals Practice Group, independent interdisciplinary divorce professionals serving Monmouth, Middlesex, and Ocean counties. For more information, visit njcollaborativeprofessionals.com.
Hey everyone, and welcome to New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio. I'm your host, Dustin Cannon. At New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio, we interview leading divorce and family law professionals to give you the information that you need to get through your divorce and move on with your life. The subject of today's show is divorce and special needs planning, and our guests are Michael Ringel and Midge Cannon-Shuck. Michael Ringel is a financial coach who's made it his mission to educate families, business owners, divorced women, and special needs families on how to achieve financial success through the implementation of financial strategies. Midge Cannon-Shuck is a licensed professional counselor, certified school social worker, student assistance counselor, and a court-trained mediator. As a licensed counselor, she not only counsels children, adolescents, and adults, but also has experience working with schools as an advocate for when there's a special needs or classified child in the family. Midge, Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, hello, Dustin. How are you?
Hi, Dustin. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I was wondering before we get started talking about divorce and special needs, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Okay. My name is Midge, and that is a nickname and one that has gone over very, very well. In my practice, basically, I will begin counseling about at the age of 3, a child at the age of 3. They'll be able to talk with me through play therapy, art therapy, and the moms are in the room. I've also had the good experiences of working at a college level and teaching in the psychology department at our local community college.
Okay.
And it's absolutely amazing how Mike can kind of fill in the gaps when you have young adults that do not have the money to get the education because the planning was not considered as their parents were getting a divorce.
How did you get into working with divorce situations, or is that a large part of your practice?
It's not a large part. I would say it's a 50-50. There are a lot of stress factors today going on, and when those stress factors begin to surface, of course, parents are having a very difficult time handling it. Because of my experiences as a child study team member, you couldn't help but bring that experience into the private counseling sector, and it has been predominant where my name is kind of known in the Ocean County area as being able to work both child study team, being an advocate, as well as doing therapy for both the parents and the children that are experiencing divorces. And on top of that, may have some delays or handicapping conditions, which makes the developmental tasks of these children a little bit more difficult.
Okay. Well, welcome. Mr. Ringel, you are a CPA and a financial coach with special interest in helping special needs families with financial planning. Can you tell us a little bit about your practice and how you got to focus on divorce and special needs?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I'm a CPA. I have my MBA from NYU, and for about the last 12, 15 years, I've really been focused on helping families, all families, avoid financial failure. And financial failure can show up in a family when cash flow goes to zero. And there are certain strategies that really need to be implemented that are a little bit uncommon to help families protect their investments, their income, and in cases of working with families with children with special needs, really protecting for government benefits. My wife is a speech pathologist, and for the last 15 years, I've been working with her, finding out all the different needs and challenges that a lot of families are facing. We have some relatives who are on the autism spectrum, and I just saw a really big need to help a lot of these families deal with a lot of the issues that they're facing because, I mean, as Midge is going to talk in a few minutes, there are a lot of family issues, emotional issues, and they know they need to do this type of planning, but a lot of times they don't have either anybody they trust or they don't know where to start. So it's my responsibility to really help them take action, implement plans that is really going to protect their income, their assets, but most importantly, the future government benefits for their child.
So what are some of the unique challenges that families with special needs encounter, and how do they pertain to or impact the divorce situation?
Well, from a financial planning side, when you incorporate divorce, what really needs to happen is both parents need to be on the same page for the support of that child. And what I mean by support is they really have to keep that child in mind to be able to come up with ideas and strategies to help protect them so that eventually they will be able to qualify, or they do qualify to receive government benefits like Medicaid or Social Security, that the planning that they do in the divorce side doesn't disqualify them for receiving those benefits. Because once you become disqualified, and that could be because they have too much money in the child's name, or too much income is being allocated to that child, it is very difficult to get back the benefits that you lost. So, for example, I have a family member who, before we started working together, their child was receiving Medicaid, which was worth millions of dollars over a lifetime for them. They had a relative pass away, and there was no special needs trust created. There was no planning that was done. So the money was inherited directly into the child's name. And because there was more than $2,000 in that child's name, it automatically disqualified them from benefits. So the type of planning that we need to do when we consider working with divorced families is both parents need to be on the same page. We need to coordinate the planning so that the child doesn't become disqualified. And there are a couple other things that we'll talk about that are really important to take into consideration in a few minutes.
Do you find that most of your clients come to you after the fact, after they've done it the wrong way and found that they've been disqualified for these programs, or do you often get with families before where you can counsel them going into the process?
That's a great question. Most of the time I work with families before this happens. They know this planning needs to be done. They know it's important. They know that they really have to ensure that the benefits will be there for their child. So I typically work with them beforehand. One of the things that I find a lot of families do is they don't do any planning whatsoever, and they hope their child is going to be okay in the future, and they hope they won't need to set up the special needs trust. But hope is not a strategy. And what I typically like to do is take them through a step-by-step process to educate them on the different estate planning strategies that are available to them, talk about the pros and cons of each one of them, ultimately get them to creating a special needs trust where eventually all of the money that's going to be left to that child is going to flow into. Because money that goes into a special needs trust is protected, and the child will still be able to receive government benefits. Any money that's in that trust can be used for supplemental care, such as increased medical cost. One of the things that I have the attorneys I work with, they write into the special needs trust, we call it the Disney clause. And that basically says that money in the trust can be used by other family members to take their sibling or their relative with special needs to Disney on vacation, and the money should be used that way. A lot of times we really need to focus on, especially in divorce, where child support is paid to. So if money is paid directly to the child, it could disqualify them from receiving the benefits. So what I try to counsel clients on doing, especially since they're going through the divorce process, is either have the child support paid directly to a special needs trust, thereby never going through the child's name, and would continue to allow them to be qualified for benefits, or they could pay child support directly to a third party, whether it be a school, they could pay for bills, it could be designated that way. This way, again, if it doesn't go through the child's name, it won't disqualify them from receiving benefits. But the biggest thing to really focus on, especially with working with families who are going through divorce, is both families, even though they've gone through this divorce process, need to be on the same page financially. They need to focus on creating the trust together. They also need to figure out how to fund the trust. And the most efficient way to fund a special needs trust is through the use of life insurance. And there are different types of life insurance. There's term insurance, which is basically life insurance that ends after a specific amount of time. And then there's permanent insurance, which lasts forever. And through a coordinated effort, really making sure that each family or each parent has a special needs trust, has the right life insurance eventually to fund the trust, and then also making sure that other relatives designate that special needs trust to receive any gift that they decide to leave in their wills. It's also really important to make sure that you take a look at all the 401ks that you have, all of the IRAs, anything that is beneficiary designated, making sure that that child's name is not one of the beneficiaries, but that the special needs trust is a beneficiary. Again, because if the child gets the money directly in his or her name, it would disqualify them from receiving government benefits.
Maybe we could step back, and there might be some listening who don't really understand what a trust is. Could you maybe just give a basic overview of what a trust is?
Sure. First thing to recognize, I'm not an attorney. I only play one on TV, so I'll just give you a little bit of background. Basically, when people do their estate planning, first thing that they're going to do is hopefully set up their wills, which says that should they pass away, what happens to their assets. Secondly, they could create a trust, and a trust basically is a standalone vehicle that could receive money, that can own assets. It has its own identification number with the IRS. If there is money in it or investments, it has to file its own tax return. But it's a way to move money from one person to outside of their estate to be able to protect that money or those investments in different ways possible.
You know, Mike, I can't begin to tell you when I had worked with the college-age student how they had wished many times, because our colleges today really are bringing in a lot of the special needs students. They have their own programs to allow especially freshmen and sophomores, to come in and be able to get some or be provided with some special services. And a lot of those students did not have the backing of the money. And as I will begin to share a little bit of the stresses as parents begin to talk about the lack of the money, the lack of the equity of the money, and of course the fighting over the financial. Mm-hmm. I wish I had known you many times that I could have brought you in my classes and had discussed with the students how important it is to set up, because these now young adults are setting up for their lives. And with the high rate of autism that's being diagnosed, and a lot of kids on that PDD spectrum, which goes from autism right to Asperger's at a very high level. And that doesn't even count the littler things, which is, and it's not little, but when we talk about ADHD, a lot of adults have a hard time keeping that focus and continuity, and sometimes even their jobs, because of that inability to stay concentrating on something. So again, you know, your financial background in this is just so important, and it should be that it should be a course for every divorcing parent to go through, handicapped child or not.
You brought up some interesting points. I appreciate that. One of the things that families typically do is, they hope for the best. They should be planning for the worst. And a lot of families have multiple children. And one of the common planning strategies is to put money into a 529 plan for college. But the problem with a 529 plan for a child with special needs is that if they don't go to college, if they don't take your classes, then either they have to use that money for another child, change the beneficiaries, or it becomes taxable when they take it out because they never went to college. We have a friend who has a very high functioning child who is brilliant. He has social issues that he'll need to deal with in the future, but he'll go to college and he'll contribute to society. But when I first met with him, the parents were planning the wrong way for him. And because of the way they were planning, he was disqualified from Medicaid for about 2 months. And we had to redesign everything to make sure he got qualified again. But he's going to go to college and he's going to be a brain surgeon someday. He's that brilliant. But as a lot of these children have other issues, which I'm sure you're going to talk about, that I would classify them, but they classify them as special needs, and they need your help.
I just want to take you out of the special ed for a moment, and I'll share with you that I do have a 16-year-old grandson who is very bright and will go to college, is already talking about it. And my son has approached me and has said, "Mom, do me a favor, take all monies out of his name." Because with the high cost of college, just to get scholarships and to have anything in his name is going to maybe not allow him to get the scholarships or maybe some monies that are out there. So your discussion is so important because what are we talking, $30,000 a year to go to school?
At least.
Okay, so we're talking $30,000, and that doesn't even count if they're going to be a resident of that school. Monies are important. The average parent is taking out loans. They're remortgaging their homes. Children are trying to work to catch up. So again, the assets of your discussion has to do with anyone that is going to go on to an education. And then let's just put into the special needs. If a child is going to need services where they're not going to go to school and they're going to be dependent on others for the rest of their lives, this puts a whole nother amount of weight on those parents. And the fightings in the home get, at that point, a little bit worse.
Oh, I appreciate what you're saying. The high cost of college today, the high cost of education, and also the lack of information that we've been taught. So you brought up something very interesting is, you say take everything out of your child's name, even if they're not, a special needs child. The reason to do that is to be able to allow them to qualify for government benefits. Any money in a 529 plan counts towards college and will reduce the amount of potential loans or grants that they get. There are strategies, for example, if you have money in an IRA, it doesn't count towards college. If you, the parent, have money in a 401k or your home, it doesn't count. And if you have money in permanent life insurance, whole life insurance that builds cash value, the money in the cash value of the life insurance does not count towards college funding. So what I've taught a lot of my clients and what I've done personally is instead of funding a 529 plan, is I've taken that money and I've applied it to permanent life insurance for a lot of reasons. Number one, if I pass away, college is paid for. A boatload of death benefit goes to my wife, college is paid for. Should I become disabled, the insurance company will pay the premium, the cash value will continue to grow, and I'll be able to use that money for college. Should I live a long and healthy life, there's money that's legally hidden from the financial aid form that eventually I could use for college. So it increases the chances of getting loans or scholarships and have the ability to have access to that money. So again, uncommon type of planning that can really help all types of family with dealing with these issues.
You know what I want to do, Mike, is I want to go back a little bit and just do some basic, let's say, education on developmental tasks of children. If we're talking children between the ages of 3 and 6, Those children, the affective development, or what we call affective development, expresses emotions verbally and they sympathize with others. When we begin to bracket the kids between 6 and 12, now this is the age group that children are beginning to overcome their fears, regulate strong emotions such as anger, frustration, anxiety, and sadness. Now please remember I said regulate, which is so important because sometimes a divorcing parent cannot. And then, of course, adolescence, that 12 to 20, which we've kind of given some time to at this point, is understanding the relationship between thoughts and behaviors and emotions, and they think accurately and rationally about self and the world. So that's the affective developmental task of what we would call an average normal child. Now, I want you to go back a little bit, and I want you to think about that 1 to 3 age group where their emotions are done through play. They don't have the vocabulary to really express. If we are talking about an Asperger's or a child, they might have that. They don't have that social functioning ability. They don't know how to incorporate that, their stress, into their everyday thinking, and then what happens is there's temper tantrums. If we're talking about that 6 to 12 group, now we're regulating strong emotions. In a divorced home situation where they're thinking about divorce or they're beginning to express their emotions out loud where children are overhearing it, they're having a very, very difficult time understanding the anger. And then the normal response is going to be, if you're hurting mommy, I have to dislike you. And if mommy, you're hurting daddy, then I have to dislike you. And then you have some other emotional problems that are along the way. That 12 to 20-year-old group, well, they're beginning to date, they're beginning to think, but still it's a home, and a divorce is a death. And I don't care if that is a child that is developmentally delayed or an everyday normal, what we consider everyday child. This is a grief process that they're going through. One of the things that I had expounded on a little bit in one of my articles was that, if the stress is so severe, you could actually cause a post-traumatic stress type of an anxiety to a child. It could be chronic stress. In most homes, one of the first things that really comes up is the blaming factor, the fighting in the homes that things aren't working, but then comes the financial part of it. Well, you've had the job your whole life. I raised the children. I need this much money. I need to do this. I need to do that. And then we begin to put a fear tactic into the child because the children are saying, uh-oh, how am I going to live? What's going to happen to me? And then we go into other situations where the home is just a battle zone and a lot of fighting. And one of the great things about the collaborative process is that a lot of the anxiety is actually done in the attorney's offices. And then when you have the mental health people and, of course, the financial, you can actually regulate or help them regulate their own emotions, that we can help regulate the emotions of a child. I'll give you a perfect example. In one of my cases right now, I have a child that is about 10 years old and is verbally not where he should be, but doing really very well. And he began to write letters in my office, which were going to be sent to the parents. And one of the first things he said was, Mommy and Daddy, maybe you should get a divorce. I can't stand the fighting anymore. And then the second part, the second part of that is, Daddy, is Mommy right that you're going to take all the money and not pay us, and you're going to find a way not to pay child support and things like that? Now, this is a 10-year-old kid that has some verbal, perceptual problems where he can't really discuss what he wants to, but that letter was so clear because of what was heard in the home.
Midge, is that letter writing simply a therapy, or is that actually sent to the parents?
Oh no, that's a therapy. We unless the individual client at that age group would like the parent to know, it is done in the office. We write letters and we just kind of tuck them away. I have had other children, though, actually want to send the letter. So in my office, I have some stationery paper and stamps and envelopes, and we mail out the letters. Parents are quite taken back by the fact that while they have these two-sided type of feelings, and that is, I don't want my mommy and daddy to split, I don't want my home to be destroyed, but I can't take this fighting anymore, and I really wish that you would, divorce. Add to that a child who has their own anxious kind of a personality profile, this just adds to it dramatically. And then you have, of course, what's happening in school. They can't concentrate there either. So it depends upon the child and how, let's say, brave they are to allow a parent to know what their thinking is. Another child I had that has a lot of mental health issues. Very bright boy, but mental health issues. Okay, so it's a little bit different. And he was acting out for a very, very long time. The psychiatrist in the child's case had put him on medication because of the acting out at home. It was the abusive behavior toward the siblings. And in school, he could sit quietly, but then when he got out, it really all hell broke loose, to coin a phrase. One day in my office, he actually went to my board and he started to scribble horribly. I mean, now children at that age can draw. Scribble on that board. His mom happened to be in session. It was the part of the session that the mom sat in. And as he's scribbling away with a very hard hand-held piece of chalk, he said, my mommy and daddy are going to get a divorce. And all of a sudden, those doors opened where a lot of the acting out behavior was the stress and the fear and the anxiety. And after that had come to the forefront, Mom at that point could relax a little bit. We now had the basis of his acting out, and we could actually begin to do heavy therapies on the fact that if this ever happened, Mommy and Daddy will love you, and Mommy and Daddy will be there for you. Mike, it's a situation where Mom is a cafeteria worker, and because she stood home raising her children, and Dad makes a very nice salary. So, the inequity there of the salaries.
Sure. Well, I think you brought up a great point, is you really need to, especially when you go through the divorce process, it's not necessarily splitting everything 50-50. The primary caregiver, and in most cases it's the mom, is going to need more money than to really support their child with special needs. The other thing is that they probably don't have enough money saved up for their own retirement. Mm-hmm. So as they go through divorce and they start to get alimony, should the splitting of the retirement assets still be 50-50, or should she get more because she hasn't had time to work? Because a lot of times, she's going to be home taking care of their child. I've seen also in a lot of situations, a lot of families are using the school system as a way to get services that they would really need to provide for their kids. And that's a whole nother topic in dealing with the school systems and how do you get, the benefits in the system that they're really allowed to get, but they're not getting because they have special needs.
Well, the school systems, they're an entity to themselves. And of course, one of the biggest percentages of your taxes truly are going into schools. And a big chunk of that goes into the special education formulas. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is a special education child can actually be in the public school system until they're 21 years of age. They do try to have them leave at that 16, 17 when they're seniors, but they really do have those couple of years extra depending upon the handicapping condition. The other thing, too, is when we're talking about the initial score is IEP. It's the individual educational plans. One of those things that parents really have to go over with a fine-tooth comb, and that is the individual plan made for the individual child, or is the individual plan actually making to fit in the little, let's say the square pegs that the school has put out, and that we're trying to make that child fit into their program. And that's an issue. One of those things that when I have to go out and advocate, and I'll be doing that again tomorrow, is just take a typical reading program. Child has really, he's brought himself out of that self-contained class because he has more aptitude at this point, but going into in-class support is a little bit more difficult. They want to take the child and they just want to throw him back into the self-contained classes. This isn't going to work for him. You're putting him back where you wanted to take him out. So, when I go into the schools, I have to say things like, okay, and what program can you devise? Sometimes you'll have a child study team member, usually the case manager or the director, slip and say, well, we don't have that program and we just can't pay for anything else. This is what we have. And that's a major slip, because an individual educational plan is just that. And so the services that you're talking about, if the school can find a way not to provide them, parents need to. I have children that do go private physical therapy, private occupational therapy. Over and above, I have them going for speech therapy other than the schools, because the schools are limited in time. There's also a difference between what a child needs educationally and what a child needs medically. And you will find that the directors of the child study teams will come to you and go, well, our job is to teach so that they can be educated. The medical profile is different.
Well, I think you brought up some great points. So when a child stays in school till age 21, if they stay to 21, then they have to start planning on what happens after age 21. Not only where are they going to hopefully work, how are they going to become part of society, but eventually really focusing, a big issue is as parents get older, where are they going to live? Because eventually, unfortunately, children grow up, parents grow up, and parents pass away. So you really have to also consider, and this could be way in the future, what type of housing situation you want to have. Here in New Jersey, as I'm sure around the country, states are really strapped for cash. One of the problems is that there are a lot of people who are looking for services and the states don't have the funding for it. So do you get on a list to try to find a group home? Do you leave your home to your child and hope that somebody's going to come in and take care of them? We actually have a couple clients who have children who are older. They're in their 30s. And what they did was they got a group of people together and they purchased a home. There are 4 residents of that home, all of whom have special needs. They chip in for a caregiver. All 4 of them work in some sort of capacity in society to make a little bit of money, to give them a high positive self-esteem, to make sure that they contribute. And those things, while they may be in the distant future, also need to be considered when you go through divorce and making sure that the assets and investments are protected, but also are going to be there to provide. What's interesting is the care, and a lot of times, is going to be lifelong, and you really need to plan for that. And the challenge in divorce planning is people are so focused on today and now and just surviving, and not really focusing on thriving.
I want to piggyback on that. Early on in my career, I did supervise the social work department in a sheltered rehab. And these were not young children. These were adults from 20 to maybe 50, 60. And along came parents. And one of the most heartbreaking situations was when we had the 30-year-old client who was still, mentally working at a 12 or a 15 age level. And a 70, 75-year-old parent would come in, and we would have our meetings, of course, to discuss how things were going. And the tears from the mom saying, I took care of this child my whole life. I'm in my mid-70s. What am I going to do? My son is only 30. And we've had that a lot because, again, this was, I'm going back a good 20, 25 years, but things really haven't changed that much. It is devastating when everybody finally gets hold of their age as a parent, the fact that the handicapping condition is not going to mean a shorter life, it's just going to mean a life that has to be supervised, and a parent that just doesn't know how to handle this, and
Sure.
that you're so on. Sheltered workshops are fantastic. Group homes are one of the best things around. However, there's a shortage. So the people that you know that actually bought the home, I can't begin to tell you how fantastic what that was, but that's really, that's really not the norm. There's just a shortage of what is needed for children as they age out of the school systems.
These seem like challenges that are going to be there for any family with special needs children, regardless whether they're getting divorced or not. And I can't imagine having the added pressure of an emotional strain of going through a divorce, which presents all kinds of other unknowns, which can be scary.
Well, I want to add to that, when we talk about divorce, we can probably talk about remarriage. And that also presents another problem because the incoming new spouse is rather reluctant to see a lot of money and time going into a child that is not really there, although they've accepted to take on all of the responsibility or some of the responsibility. So, that's another dynamic that really hasn't been brought up, and that is, step parents, step children, half children. That all lends itself to the financial as well as the emotional turmoil and the stress factors that especially a handicapping child has, but may not be able to display other than in the way of temper tantrums. Mm-hmm. Regress behavior, I always look for that in the office. If all of a sudden a parent is saying, my son or daughter has been toilet trained as long as I can remember, all of a sudden now going to the bathroom in their pants. The night tremors at night, the bad daydreams, the nightmares, just sometimes children will just sit back and kind of go into themselves and not talk about anything. So when a parent begins to fight with the other parent and money is brought up, we all know one thing: you cannot survive in this world without any money. It's really for the child. It's not only thought-provoking, but the anxiety levels and the stress levels of someone that can't, as we say, regulate those feelings because of the handicapping conditions. It becomes a major issue.
You're exactly right. And one of the reasons trusts are used in any estate planning is that if money goes into a trust, it can be specifically designed for, or the beneficiary could be a specific child, it could be specific family members, and you really want to make sure that money going into a special needs trust, whether it be specific assets or life insurance proceeds, that it's specifically designed for the care of your child. Not the stepchildren, not the new spouses coming in, but you really need to focus on protecting your child first and then working with the rest of the family.
Yeah, and again, for mental health specialists, then we, many times in our offices, of course, we get the parents that are getting disgruntled with the second marriage because of sometimes what is considered an inequity of monies, along with the fact that we know that we have the primary individual that must be taken care of. It's a catch-22 that we're living in. I think more and more, parents are getting divorced, and I'm sorry to say that many of the divorces in a handicapped home situation where a child is handicapped is because of the handicap. There has been so much stress, so much worry, so much turmoil, that they just are finding it very, very hard to stay within that marriage. And we are seeing more and more divorces with a handicapping child.
I was just going to ask, Midge, if the handicap situation itself was a factor in some of these divorces, and you read my mind at that
Absolutely.
Same moment.
Well, it's not only that, Dustin. It's not just the handicapping condition. It's because a lot of people get married unable to. They're not mature enough, I should say, to handle a child that comes into the world that needs a lot of help. We look at all of these television shows where children are born and they're managing well. How many shows have you seen where a child has to be picked up every day, change diapers through their adulthood? They really can't go anywhere. There's not the freedom. Finding a babysitter that can manage the handicap is very hard to come by if a parent will even trust someone else with their child. And again, that's where Mike comes in, because, parents, in order to stay together, they have to remember that they need their own little time. They need to be husband and wife. They need to go back to the emotional levels that were always there. A handicapping situation doesn't allow it. You're taking care of the child, you're fighting with the schools, you're wondering how to manage it, you're back and forth to doctors, you're back and forth to hoping in your heart that there's a miracle, and the miracles don't always happen.
Do you think that people having hope of a miracle leads to lack of planning for the future? I don't want to put the two together, Dustin. I'd rather say that most people that are having a very difficult time, we all want out of that stress. So you hope something good will happen, a miracle will happen, they'll find a cure. The question basically is it twofold? You know what I mean? Is it the handicapping condition, or is it just the hope of the miracle that doesn't come? You always hope for a miracle. You got to have hope. You got to have that feeling that faith is going to have this all turn out okay. But you begin to lose that faith.
I think that's a great point, Dustin. I've seen it many, many times in trying to educate families who are just beginning to start down the road of special needs financial planning, is that some of them are still in a little bit of denial, in the sense that my child's going to be okay. Especially I see it a lot of times with high-functioning autistic children. I don't even think we're allowed to use the word Asperger's anymore.
Oh, well, they're all on the PDD spectrum. Everything's so politically correct. They change it so quickly. It's hard to catch hold.
So what I'm seeing is when I work with clients, I say, look, you know what? We create these trusts and we hope for the best. And if money flows into the trust eventually, or even right away, and the child is able to have responsibility to handle money, and the trustee, who is tasked with the responsibility of overseeing that money, believes that that child can handle the money, then they can dissolve the trust and give all the money directly to the child. I was working with actually a friend, and who realized that while his child is very high functioning and is going to really contribute to society, is that if somebody came to him and asked him for money, his home, or any possessions that he has, the child would give it to them because they want to make friends. And the biggest fear that the parent has is that the child is too nice, too naive, and people are going to take advantage of them. And that's one of the reasons why we create the trust as well. You hope for the best, you plan for the worst, and if something happens in between, you just roll with the punches.
The other thing, too, is, when we talk about the emotional levels in the home as this divorce process is beginning from its inception, the concern for money is major. I can't even think of how fantastic it would be for a child to come into the office and say, I'm really heartbroken, my mom and dad are divorcing, but I know that we're all going to be okay. I'm not going to live on the street. I'm going to have food on the table. I might be able to go to a vocational school if that's where that child has those levels to go. I would love to see the child come in with one secure foundation, which is the financial, because that's one of the biggest ones.
Oh, absolutely. And, it depends on, unfortunately, the bitterness between the parents often gets in the way of consideration of not only the child with special needs, but also all the children. And I'm sure you see that all the time. You really need to plan carefully. You really need to focus on the future. One of the things that I see often is a lot of times parents focus on, funding the special needs trust and having money available for them, that they often forget about their own retirement. They often forget that they could get sick. And if they needed care when they're older, where's the money going to come from? So we also really need to focus on retirement planning, Social Security planning, long-term care planning, making sure there's long-term care insurance available so that if the parents need to use that for their own care, it won't take away from assets that are going to go to the child. So, taking a holistic, comprehensive look at somebody's entire financial world, either as they go through the process of divorce or they're through the process of divorce, is extremely valuable and could have everlasting benefits.
The thing that, keeps passing through my head is from the very beginning, when I have a couple that comes to me and they're saying, this marriage is just not working. Mm-hmm. And that happens. It's just not working. To bring in a financial person to say, in the process of relieving as much stress as we can, to have to speak to someone who will help the two of you figure that part of it out. The idea is to try to dismantle the major issues so that home can continue in a peaceful setting where children aren't made upset, where parents can still mentally hold down jobs and work. And, of course, now with the new alimony laws, things may be changing a little bit. And I'm sure that you've worked with that a little bit also. But from my perspective, mental health, I would love to see more and more collaborative divorce happen, especially in a handicapping situation. When you have a handicapped child at home, it would just relieve so much of the anger and the stress, and for that child will feel a little bit more secure.
Well, I'm sure for all this planning to happen, there has to be complete financial transparency in the divorce process, which lends to the collaborative process.
Absolutely. It's, when families choose to use the collaborative process, you're right, full disclosure on the financial situation of both families is extremely, extremely important. And hopefully, through this process, it'll be a little bit more amicable than if they went through mediation or they litigated. Mm-hmm. We can, the focus of collaborative divorce is really, the family unit, focusing on the entire family, not only financial, but also the emotional side, dealing with all those issues. Hopefully the children come first in any divorce process, but especially in collaborative divorce. So we really take a holistic approach to everything that goes on with the family in order to get the best outcome for everybody, and so they can live long and happy lives.
Well, I think that's a good place to maybe stop. I think we could go on forever. There are just so many facets of this area. Midge, you talked about the importance of having hope, and I think that you're both giving real solutions to people and giving them hope for the future and a solid plan. I don't think that either of you are doing this because it's your business. I think that you truly care about helping families with special needs planning, and I think that's important. I certainly appreciate having you on today, and if people who are listening want to learn more, don't know where to start, they have a special needs child, they're facing a divorce or not facing a divorce, where do they begin?
If they come to groups such as ours, which is, the divorce group, we have individuals that will take care of all the spheres. We have our attorneys, we have our mental health experts, and we have our financial individuals. And each one of them can provide, from their perspective, the help that they need and direction that they need to go in. If they don't have people that will kind of give them some tutelage along the way, it can get very confusing, and that's a problem. So again, your school systems are there to help with the educational process, but always remember that that's an industry, like any industry, and they have their, where they can only spend so much money, and they kind of cut off some things or can't provide some services. And then, of course, you have the mental health people that can come in and begin to talk about and help you actually separate the major problems, begin to prioritize, make sense of your life. And then, of course, Mike, you can speak for the financial part of it.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there are a tremendous amount of resources out there to help families to understand where to go as far as learning about special needs planning. They're more than welcome to go to my website, which is specialneedswealthadvisors.com. You can learn a little bit more there. You can go to the Collaborative Divorce site, Collaborative Divorce Professionals, for families who are going through divorce and want to learn more about the process. And just want to thank you very much for having us this morning and hopefully educating today's listeners on how they could move forward in this planning.
We have been talking today with Michael Ringel, CPA and financial coach, and Midge Cannon-Shuck, a licensed professional counselor and school social worker. For those of you listening, you can learn more about Mr. Ringel and Midge Cannon-Shuck by visiting NewJerseyDivorceTalkRadio.com, and you can review the show notes. I also want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Collaborative Divorce Professionals, of which both Mr. Ringel and Ms. Cannon-Shuck are members. You can learn more about the group at njcollaborativeprofessionals.com. If you're interested in learning about collaborative law, or you want to connect with a collaborative law professional, go to their website, download the Collaborative Divorce Professionals brochure, and you can view a profile of each member, including Mr. Ringel and Midge Cannon-Shuck. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio is brought to you by the Collaborative Divorce Professionals Practice Group, independent interdisciplinary divorce professionals serving Monmouth, Middlesex, and Ocean counties. For more information, visit njcollaborativeprofessionals.com.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio, empowering families to divorce with dignity.